Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to the Office of the eSafety Commissioner, and particularly Ms. Iman Grant. Would you care to make an opening statement?
If you'd indulge me, I would like to keep you up to great. Thank you for the opportunity to update the committee on some important developments at eSafety since the last meeting. Firstly, you might have seen that eSafety recently took enforcement action against messaging services Telegram. We gave the company an infringement notice for almost $1 million for missing our transparency reporting deadline by over 5 months after dogged and consistent efforts to deliver the legally enforceable notice to them. This delay held up publication of critical information about what the company has and has not taken to address any terrorist and violent extremist material, as well as child sexual exploitation material on its platform. And I think you would agree that this is the worst of the worst online content being made accessible to Australians and deserves answers. Telegram took 160 days to provide the information required to complete the transparency report, obstructing eSafety from delivering its function under the Online Safety Act in a timely and efficient way. We believe this action sends an important deterrent message to industry that timely transparency is not a voluntary requirement in Australia, and that all companies that operate here must comply with Australian law. You may have also seen a new eSafety report showing Australian children are easily circumventing inadequate and poorly enforced minimum age rules employed by 8 well-known social media services. In fact, 80% of Australian 8 to 12-year-olds used one or more social media service in 2024. This is based on the findings of a national survey looking at the social media use of children aged 8 to 15, combined with information provided directly by my office, to the office by the platforms in response to information requests under the basic online safety expectations. None of these platforms has sufficiently stringent measures in place to determine age accurately at the point of sign-up. So there is currently not much stopping an underage child from entering a false age or date of birth to set up an unrestricted adult account without extra safety features. There is clearly more work to be done to bolster age assurance measures, especially as some services will be expected to prevent under-16s from having accounts when the government's social media minimum age legislation comes into force later this year. Implementing these new industry obligations will be challenging for eSafety too, but we are hitting the ground running thanks to considerable work we've done already in this space, including the updated age assurance issues paper we released in July 2024. This, in turn, built on consultations we conducted for the Restricted Access System Declaration under the Online Safety Act of 2021 and our extensive work in developing the age verification roadmap, which we provided to government in March 2023. eSafety is mindful of the need to balance the imperatives of safety with privacy, children's rights to expression online, and a range of other fundamental human rights. Young people should also help inform these processes, which is why we continue to support our eSafety Youth Council. Of course, the government's age assurance trial that is currently underway will provide vital input. Since the last time I updated the committee, eSafety's world-first standards have now come into force, requiring global tech giants to tackle the most harmful online content, including child sexual abuse material and pro-terror content. As per our regulatory guidance, we are giving industry a 6-month grace period to improve their safety systems and for enforcement of the standards to start in earnest. Our designated internet services and relevant electronic services standards require file and photo storage services like Apple iCloud, Google Drive, and Microsoft OneDrive, as well as chat and messaging services to prevent their products being misused to store and distribute this harmful material. They also cover generative AI services where there are insufficient controls to reduce the risk of generating child sexual exploitation material, which could include some so-called nudified or declothing apps. We've written to a number of these providers whose technology has been implicated in the creation of deep-faked image-based abuse of under 18s in classrooms across Australia, enabling the creation of synthetic CSAM to the great detriment of these schoolgirls. We have let them know of their safety obligations and that we will take enforcement action in earnest. eSafety has released a number of groundbreaking research publications with critical Australian partners during this period. In January, we published joint research with QUT showing 1 in 4 girls have experienced online sexual exploitation online by an adult by the time they turn 18. Girls are often as young as 11 when this occurs, and we took the opportunity to once again urge families to prioritize online safety conversations with their children and provided them with the blueprint in which to have these important discussions. We, in fact, have a broad array of information and resources to help parents do just that, as well as to report online abuse at esafety.gov.au. Earlier this month, we published the second of 2 reports on what can be done to provide the healthy, positive role models and experiences our boys and young men tell us that they are looking for online. We've also telegraphed the work we're doing with a range of men's groups, including Movember and the Man Cave, to develop constructive guidance and a range of innovative resources for young Australian men. And last week, we partnered with the Australian Institute of Criminology to take a closer look at sexual extortion, which we've seen a 1,300% rise in complaints to our image-based abuse scheme since 2018, the vast majority from boys and young men. Shockingly, more than 1 in 10 adolescents surveyed had been sexually extorted in their lifetime, most when they were under the age of 18. The research once again highlights the importance of continuing to address sextortion right across the community. And last week, I met with law enforcement officials across the country to talk about ways we can join efforts to deliver effective prevention strategies for young men facing this incredibly pernicious form of social engineering. In the 6 months to December alone, we received 1,400 actionable reports of sexual extortion to our image-based abuse scheme, and we know this is just the tip of the iceberg. But on a brighter note, I'm pleased to be able to say that the scheme achieved a fantastic success rate of 98% in removing abuse material during the 2023-24 period. And this goes a long way to reducing the significant harm these young men are facing so that they know that they are supported, that they are not alone, and that this too shall pass. I look forward to discussing further with the committee today how we are fulfilling our mission to keep all Australians safer online, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's very helpful. Now, we have heard a lot about adult cyber abuse scheme this year. And I wonder if you could walk the committee through the process that you use for handling complaints, and particularly how you prioritise those complaints. Do some things get pushed further up the priority list than others, and how you manage that? Right.
Well, as you probably know, the Australian Adult Cyber Abuse Scheme is the newest scheme that came into force in with the Online Safety Act of 2021. And that was because of a very strong public push to emulate the youth-based child cyberbullying scheme for adults. So the government at the time made sure that when they set the thresholds that it was well above to encourage freedom of speech and well above defamation, and set the thresholds very high. In fact, there's a 2-pronged objective test where investigators, once a person who's experienced cyber abuse and reports it to the platform, they can come to us if it isn't taken down, and we assess whether or not there was serious intent to harm and not just mere emotional distress, and that it's menacing, harassing, and offensive to an ordinary, reasonable person in all circumstances. So again, a very high bar. As a result, it is the smallest complaint scheme. The vast majority of reports we receive are for child sexual abuse material. That makes up about 84%. So only about 6% of the reports we get are actionable for removal or formal removal notice. I think what I'll do, though, is turn over to our General Manager, Ms. Snell, to explain how that process works, or to Mr. Downey, if you prefer.
Thank you, Commissioner. Heidi Snell, General Manager, Regulatory Operations. So the process when we get a complaint in, as the Commissioner has explained, they need to first of all make a complaint to the social media company. So we receive the complaint, we check whether it's met the thresholds of whether they're an Australian citizen, whether they've already complained, and then we assess it against the thresholds around, as the Commissioner also identified, whether a reasonable person would consider that the material was intended to cause serious harm, and whether a reasonable person in the targeted Australians' position would have thought that that was harassment, etc. So we do those assessments. At that point, if we think we need further information to clarify those, we'll contact the complainant and get that information. And then we make a decision, we assess it, and if we think it meets the threshold, then the next step is to consider either formally issuing a takedown notice to the platform or engaging with them in an informal way. And I can talk more to the reasons why we might engage informally. But firstly, if it doesn't meet the thresholds, but we think it's likely that it might breach the terms of service of the relevant platform, then we'll notify the platform for them to exercise their own discretion to review it for themselves to determine whether it does breach their terms of service, and if it does, whether they're going to take any action. They're not obliged to report that back to us or anything, so that's an option for them. We also, in those circumstances, provide the complainant with other avenues for further support themselves if we're not going to take any further action. If we've decided it meets the threshold, then sometimes we might engage informally with the platforms first. Now, the reasons for that is that a lot of platforms actually prefer informal engagement. It doesn't put the same amount of regulatory burden on them, so that's a positive for them, and for the complainants it can achieve a result more quickly. So it's a win-win in those situations. If a platform doesn't respond or doesn't take it down and we've considered that it meets the threshold, the next step would be to issue a formal notice, and we do that when we think it's appropriate.
So I note that you said that it's the smallest cohort of incoming that you have. Would that mean that you just deal with all of them, or is there a prioritisation pathway that you use?
No, I mean, we have no litmus test. If we think there's imminent threat to harm or death, then we might triage it or refer it right on to law enforcement. But the vast majority of cases that we are actioning are, in fact, very severe. Doxing, where personal information might be shared about the person. Sometimes it's about where they live. We've seen forms of relationship retribution where former partners will say, my former partner's a prostitute, here's her address, knock on her door. So again, things that could put them in peril, serious threats of harassment. And remember, it does have to be directed at an Australian individual, an adult, so it doesn't capture groups. I think it's also worth saying that in this committee and through some of the challenges in the ART, they have been really focused on individuals that are gender diverse. Probably 2% of the reports that we take involve gender diverse individuals. We also know that there is a much higher instance through research and practice of trans individuals, for instance, being targeted. And I'd just like to remind the committee that this is about targeted, direct online abuse that is designed to silence voices and to cause serious harm. So this is about online abuse. We don't choose who complains to us. We respond to everyone. We have to look at the facts and the evidence available to us at the time.
Great, thank you. It was really great to be able to join your team last week at the amazing Port Adelaide Football Club, potentially the best football club in the country.
You didn't even get a rise out of it.
No, I know. And she's an opposing supporter. That's okay. Lovely to see that you're agreeing with me there, Senator Hanson-Young. Look, it was.
I'm just sticking by the rules of not picking fights in the committee is what I'm doing, Chair. So just letting you know.
For those who don't know, we are from opposing home team towns. which is entertaining and always fun and friendly.
Until it's not.
The amazing Port Adelaide Football Club and Centrecare were launching a project funded and supported through the eSafety Commissioner's Office. And I wonder if you would like to just take us through the kind of education programs that you are supporting and why you're funding sort of NGOs and such like to be doing this work. Because I certainly know they took us through the program, showed us the online videos, they'd utilised the players to connect with the kids. It's basically an online resource for all schools, free, to promote behaviour, how to deal with issues, and the way they talked about how they developed it was really, really impressive. So I'd be keen to understand a bit more about your education programs.
Well, thank you. When I started, grants were not part of the eSafety Education, Prevention and Communities program. And we've now had 3 different rounds. The first were broad online safety grants programs, 3 rounds of over $10 million apiece. The second really focused on tech-based abuse against women, which we know has been a very important issue. And I guess the way I like to look at it is it allows, 1,000 innovative flowers to bloom, the creativity, the innovation, the impact that these community groups are having at the coalface. Is more than any one agency could do. If I may, I'd like to call up Mr. Clark, who runs our Education, Prevention and Communities program, to talk a little bit more about some of these programs. I thought he'd be rip-roaring ready to go.
I think we've converted him to the Port Adelaide Football Club as well. I'm pretty sure I saw you with a scarf on down there.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Senator. As the Commissioner mentioned, the first round with $9 million over 3 grant rounds, one of the biggest things we see the impact of these community grants is that they're able to complement and build on our existing suite of resources. So, for example, with the online safety grants, the first 2 rounds had an impact of around 2.5 million Australians in local communities. And so the third round, of which the launch was last week, is the final tranche of that. They go to a very diverse range of community organisations. So, for example, Port Adelaide with Centrecare and Catholic Care NT, but we've worked with Project Rocket, a Maze Foundation, who develop work specifically for young people with disability as well. So it is just a really great way to get into direct community engagement.
And leveraging off the relationships they already have and the connection they already have, I assume.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. That's really all I had. It was lovely to be there with you, Mr. Clark. It was a very uplifting day. We will now go to Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. Look, I do want to ask about what type of consultation you've had from the government since the passage of their online, the social media ban. You've been on the record previously about the fact that blunt bans in and of themselves don't necessarily work to make social media platforms safer. What type of consultation has happened with the government since the passage of that legislation?
Well, listen, as you know, we don't make the laws, but we implement them. And this is, a very novel and complicated piece of legislation we take very seriously. And there are a lot of interdependent and moving parts. So, of course, right now, there are 2 very important processes taking place right now. The consultation around the disallowable instrument that is being run by the department. As you know, the legislation requires that eSafety set out independent safety advice in the context of that. And when that advice is requested, we're looking at about 100 different platforms. We're, of course, using our regulatory insights, our complaints and investigations data. We're also looking at things like harmful and deceptive design practices. Because certainly when you're talking about opaque algorithms or addictive features or algorithmic manipulation, I think under 16s would certainly benefit from not being exposed to that. That's not really a fair fight. So when we are asked for that information, we will provide it to the minister, and that will be part of her consideration in terms of determining which platforms are contained under the scheme. The second part, of course, is the age verification trial. We've signed a separate MOU with ACCS just so we can stay arm's length. This is being run by the department. Obviously, we're following it with great interest. We signed the MOU so that everything was transparent and above board. We provided input, for instance, into their evaluation proposal because whatever outputs they have will really inform our reasonable steps. So the most important area for us is in determining the reasonable steps, and the dependencies there are which technologies pass muster that are both deemed to be safe and private enough. We're building a team, what we're calling the SMART team, the social media age restriction team, and an industry supervision person. So we're starting to put those into place. I think that deep, meaningful consultation is really important to me, including young people in the process themselves. The other thing that we're doing is a theory of change. And that is done by our evaluation and research team, and we're making that available through a panel process to academics that are in this field so that we can actually measure the impact and have an evaluation basis and be able to look at unintended consequences as well as benefits.
Yep. Sorry. Senator Roberts, if you're not on, maybe turn the camera off while you're waiting, because thank you.
It's great to see you're wearing a seatbelt, though, Senator Roberts. All about safety. Yeah. eSafety and real safety.
Thank you. Could I? I'm interested to see how that rolls out, and obviously, so just to be clear, the online safety rules, which is effectively what will determine which platforms are in or out.
Those will be determined by the Minister for Communication.
And you haven't been consulted on those yet, but you expect to be?
Well, the minister through the department is consulting with stakeholders on that now. She will request at the appropriate time our independent safety advice. And I imagine before she makes her final determination, she'll discuss it with us as she always does.
Okay. But that hasn't happened yet. So at this point, we still don't know whether is YouTube in or out, is Spotify in or out. Or where does Discord sit on any of this?
That is what, this really important initial process is meant to determine.
There were some draft rules tabled today by the thing that actually gives guidance on that.
Good, okay. Could I go to zoom out a bit?
Sure.
Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the impact of online safety and what the world looks like in terms of social media companies behaving and looking after users following the US election. We've seen, obviously Elon Musk have a lot of newfound power in the White House. He's literally hanging out in the Oval Office daily, it seems. And obviously there's been announcements and changes at Meta as a result of Mr Zuckerberg wanting to suck up to the president. I'm interested as to what, you're an expert in this. Your agency looks at how these platforms engage. Are you worried about the comments and changes and behaviours of these big tech platforms since the election of re-election of the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, I would note we're in touch with these major companies on a daily basis through complaints, through our codes and standards processes. And when we did learn of the plans to roll back the online hate policies, I did reach out to Facebook globally and locally to ask whether or not they expected whether our working relationship and our arrangements would change markedly as a result. They said no, and it's been less than 30 days, so we haven't seen any market change, but we'll continue to watch. I mean, my job is to enforce the laws of Australia under the Online Safety Act and to ensure that children in particular are kept safe.
Has any government ministers or departmental officers reached out to talk to you about how to handle this going forward? In particular in relation to how the US is behaving, given the amount of power these tech bros seem to have in the White House?
Well, listen, the government-to-government engagement does happen at the leadership level. The way that we don't have a direct counterpart in the United States. We've worked tangentially with a number of organizations like the FTC, like the Department of Justice. Just last December, we did a project with the Department of Homeland Security and 40 US-based tech and AI companies around safety by design to combat child sexual abuse material. So this was just 2 months ago. I think that in particular is an issue where there'll be synergies. When I started this role, that was part of the first Trump administration, so we've continued, cordial relations in areas where there are intersections, but I'm, of course, letting the government take the lead on engagement with the Trump administration. Yes,
but there's been no official briefing sought from the minister, either Minister Rowland or indeed Minister Wong in relation to these matters.
I have not spoken to Minister Wong. Unfortunately, I haven't spoken directly to Minister Rowland, but I speak to their office on a regular basis.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Cadell.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to in your thing, the Telegram situation. So, you said 160 days that they had to comply and they chose not to. Has there been any communication why they chose not to, or have they just gone radio silence? Or
It was an interesting situation because we've issued about 30 notices to 19 different companies, and it's standard that we would ask the question, say, we've got a transparency notice, it's legally enforceable. Can we, are we sending this to the right entity? And they will usually tell us yes. We had an email, a single name of a person, and the email for the abuse team, and we continued to use that, and we let them know we were going to issue a notice. They wouldn't accept the notice. When we asked them where we should send it to, they wouldn't respond, and so we tried to send it physically.
They existed. It wasn't a dead email address. This person was communicating.
It was very sporadic and frankly quite shady.
Yep.
So, it was unlike any engagement we had had before. Things changed, and they have had a abuse team. They're a billion-dollar company with 950 million users. They have a legal compliance officer. They have what is called a grievance officer, which is required under the India IT Act. So they've had these personnel in place since 2021, and they decided to engage around late August of last year.
Okay, so I take odd amount, 957,780. I take that's a penalty unit multiplier, not any other strange amount. I think Senator Shoebridge last time raised questions when there was challenges to this. Can Telegram appeal the infringement notice? Can they get? What's the process there? Are they stuck with it, or what happens now?
They can
Right.
appeal. They have 28 days
From when?
to ask for
From yesterday?
from when it was issued,
When was
which
that?
was late last week.
Yeah.
Would you like to continue, Mr. Fleming?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Richard Fleming, General Counsel. So just to run through some of the obligations on Telegram. They don't have to pay is the short answer.
That was the same situation that we went through. Yeah, okay.
So they can choose to pay to resolve the issue. They can also seek an extension of time to pay the amount. They can choose not to pay. They can seek to have it withdrawn. And then they can also seek judicial review of the issuing of a notice. In terms of what it means for eSafety, if they don't pay, we can do nothing, or we can enforce the notice by commencing proceedings in the federal court.
Okay. Now, I think from the reading, you could have put a higher penalty level against it. Is that my understanding? You could have chosen that?
Yes.
What was the maximum you could have gone to?
I believe it was 2.7 million.
Like a 3 times
Certainly
multiplier?
over 2 million.
Yep. Okay, I'll take it on notice, but between 2 and 3
we
million.
could put that on notice.
Okay.
It was substantially more. This was meant to send it, as I said, a
That
deterrent
deterrent,
message, but it also acknowledged that eventually they did come to the table. But if every company, obstructed our ability to do our jobs for 5 or 6 months at a time, we wouldn't be able to provide this transparency and without this transparency, there is no accountability or responsibility.
Yep. You mentioned 20 odd other notices for information you gave out. So they were Meta, Google, Reddit, X, they were all, you were satisfied with the processes the other platforms went through or companies went through?
We can go through those. I think we issued one formal warning.
Yeah, in respect of the same notice that we issued
Oh.
to Telegram, there were 8 notices issued.
Yep.
The Commissioner was talking more broadly over a period of time, how
Okay.
many notices we've issued, but in respect of the 8 that were issued, then X also refused to comply and has actually seeking review of that notice, so that's a matter before
But they're
the
engaging.
tribunal. X is not, that's a matter before the tribunal, so there's nothing more that we can really say about that. All of the other platforms responded within time and or sought extensions as appropriate at the time.
Just to give you the overall view, just to make sure you have these numbers, 19 non-periodic notices to 30 services regarding child sexual abuse material, online hate, and terrorist and violent extremist material.
Yep.
We've given 2 infringement notices, one to X Corp, one to Telegram, 2 service provider notifications, 1 formal warning to 3 companies in relation to 4 notices.
Okay.
And we have 8 periodic reporting notices that we'll be publishing shortly.
So I'm showing my lack of knowledge here when we talk about takedown notices and stuff like that. It works on platforms where there are posts and there are things like this, the Reddit and stuff. Given peer-to-peer, and your stat 1 in 4 girls is suffering some sort of sexual thing. And I have a mother, I've just been texting when I couldn't find the right folder for what questions I was going to ask you. I was reaching out. 14-year-old daughter, 7-year-old male just sends a junk pic, and Xavier from Cardiff, you shouldn't advertise inferior products. But what steps does she take to try and protect it? Like we said shut down, get it off, but it's a split relationship and she doesn't have control of the device all the time. You've said you've got to go to the platform first on a peer-to-peer, and what can she do to protect her daughter when she doesn't control the device?
Do you know what platform that was on?
Instagram.
Instagram, and that's a concern that we've raised.
Snapchat's been banned.
With Meta, is that 1 in 8 young people, young girls, have reported being solicited by an adult, which is a criminal offence.
Yep.
That's research that Instagram undertook themselves.
Instagram did their own research and found 1 in 8.
Yep, and they still don't have any kind of button or functionality for a young person to be able to say, I've been approached by an adult, this is creepy. So that is another issue that I've continued to raise with their senior leadership. They do have teen accounts, but there's clearly a lot more that needs to be done. In a case like that, if unsolicited intimate imagery...
Well, even solicited 14-year-olds or 17-year-olds
Pardon me?
Yeah, rubbish, isn't it? Or
Well,
it's illegal.
They're both still minors,
Yeah.
but I mean, I would recommend that she, of course, block. And
The mother
and
did,
not
but,
and not engage. And because he is a minor, or me, as another mother, if I would be speaking to their parents.
Oh, unknown. Yeah,
Unknown. Oh, unknown.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if they're 17, and
Yeah,
it could
correct.
be a criminal offence.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, this is the problem with commingled platforms.
Yeah. Okay. So on that peer-to-peer stuff, it's much harder, isn't it? There's not takedown notices, things are there. You're not reported. It's a much unsafer space. The Snapchats and these things.
Well, so through our complaints and investigations, we do have a cyberbullying scheme, which does deal. It's almost always peer-to-peer, and an extension of that. If it's image-based abuse, if it's sharing of non-consensual imagery without consent, as I said, we have a 98% success rate, so that can be reported to us through our complaint schemes. And generally, when they're minors, that is then considered child sexual abuse material if there's nudity involved. So we refer to the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation.
I'm going to look at the chair if she's going to rotate or if I'm going to go on a separate matter.
I'll go to Senator Roberts and come back to you. Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for attending today. Can I first of all pay a compliment, and I'll read out some statistics. From the ACMA Annual Report 2023-24, the Office of the eSafety Commissioner has received 13,824 complaints regarding web URLs, with 82% relating to reports about child sexual abuse, child abuse or paedophile activity. This is a 19% increase from the previous year. Now, you sent, or your office sent, 9,190 notifications relating to child sexual abuse material to the InHope, which I understand are the good guys, the right people to work with, network, and referred 130 investigations to the Australian Federal Police. On cyber abuse, you received 2,695 complaints to the cyberbullying scheme for Australian children and 3,113 complaints to the adult cyber abuse scheme with a removal rate of 88%, where removal was required. My opening comment is simple. Well done. Thank you very much. This is important work. Now, my first question, you finalised 9,461 critical investigations into terrorist and violent extremist content, representing a 229% increase. That's amazing. Increase in these types of complaints from the previous year. So I'd like to ask about that. How do you define terrorist and violent extremist content?
I will turn over to Ms. Snell to talk about that. That is part of our illegal and restricted content team under the online content scheme.
I'm actually going to invite Mr. Downey, who is the Executive Manager for our Investigations Branch, who oversees this work, to talk specifically to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Brian Downey, Executive Manager of the Investigations Branch. When we're dealing with terrorism and violent extremist content under the Online Safety Act, we deal with that terrorism defined under the Criminal Code, so the pure definition of what a terrorist act is. However, when we're applying the Online Safety Act, we apply the content according to the classification scheme, and we'll classify that material as either refused classification, which then falls into Class 1 and Class 2 definitions.
Thank you. Is this content relating to Australians or Australian content or international content?
With the complaints that we receive content that can be generated or hosted anywhere in the world. But the key is that it's accessible by the people within the Australian community.
Okay, thank you. Do you seek this content out yourself or do you rely on a complaint before acting?
Generally, we rely on a complaint before acting. However, we do have own motion investigation provisions where we are then able to further conduct investigations to locate material that may be in furtherance of that complaint.
Okay, thank you. Of those 9,461 completed investigations, what was the outcome, please?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice for the specific details of those investigations, but in the majority of cases that content is removed.
Thank you. Is there any demonstrable benefit from you taking this material down? What is your benefit to the taxpayer in this aspect of your office?
Well, I think, Senator, having access to that type of content, whether it be globally or not, is very harmful to members of the community. That material can be used to incite violence, can be used to radicalise vulnerable people or youth, which can then, obviously, as we've seen in the media, can be then used to incite further violence within the community. So the less access to that type of content can only be beneficial for the Australian community.
And I'd note, Senator Roberts, that Director General of ASIO Burgess has said that the vast majority of terrorism investigations they're conducting right now are of young people between the ages of 14 and 21, and in every single case they've been radicalized somehow on the internet. You would probably also be aware that heartbreakingly the stabbing video of Bishop Mari Emanuel that was geo-blocked here by X but was available in the rest of the world. In the sentencing of the 17-year-old Southport killer, Axel Rudabakabanda, who went and stabbed 3 little girls to death while they were making bracelets at a Taylor Swift-themed dance party. That very video, that very Wakely stabbing video, he accessed on X 25 minutes before he stabbed those little girls and claimed that that was his inspiration. So you can imagine that this is something that the UK government has wanted to talk to us about. We have a partnership with Ofcom. We, of course, have different powers, but I think it's just a very powerful reminder that this kind of content is accessed by young people. It can normalize, desensitize, and in the worst cases, radicalize.
Thank you. On page 206 of your report, or the ACMA report, there's a graph which shows X is the source of 5% of your cyber abuse claims. Google, 4%, compared to Facebook on 25%. Page 216 of your report lists major non-compliance actions. X has 4, Google 1. Why does X occupy so much of your time?
In terms of adult cyber abuse?
In terms of terrorism complaints and cyber abuse?
Well, Senator, if you'll recall back in April 16th, around the Wakely stabbing, we worked with all platforms, and they, with the exception of Meta and X Corp, they all did a good job in trying to identify, detect, and remove the Wakely terrorism video. We weren't satisfied that either Meta or X did, but once we issued formal removal notices, Meta responded and complied within the hour, and of course, you know the story, X said, we'll see you in court. And so that's what has taken our time.
So what about the others? That would apply to one of your complaints against them. What about the others? Why the other 3?
Well, it depends on the type of harm, Senator. So, for instance, when we're talking about youth-based cyberbullying, most of the cyberbullying happens on the top 4 platforms where children spend their time, on YouTube, TikTok, Snap, and Instagram. When it comes to image-based abuse, there's a much higher proportion now of sexual extortion targeting young men between the ages of 18 and 24. They tend to meet on Instagram, sometimes on Snap, and then they're moved off platform. So it depends on the form of abuse. It also depends on the complaints we get. But when it comes to the terrorist and child sexual abuse material, we go to where the content is hosted and shared.
So that still doesn't answer the question, Ms. Imran-Grant, about you've got four major non-compliance actions against X and only 1 on Google. Yet you've mentioned several platforms. Why does X occupy so much of your time?
Because they did not comply with our notices, and Google came close to not complying, so we gave them a formal warning. But would you like to?
Yeah, Senator Roberts, just wanted to mention that those tribunal and court cases often are initiated by X, so we're responding to the claims that they make challenging our powers. So that's why they feature in the list.
The report goes on to list how many notices were issued under each part of the Act, yet does not provide a detailed list. This is fine for child and adult abuse material, of course, so we're happy with that. For extremist and violent or Class 1 material, though, why have we not provided a list of what the Commissioner considers worthy of a takedown notice and reasons why? Because there's a widespread belief in the public you're overstepping on your choice of material to take down.
I'd just like to respectfully read from some weighted and validated surveys of the Australian public. In fact, in November 2024, a weighted survey of Australians found that 87% of those surveyed supported the introduction of stronger penalties for social media companies that do not comply with Australian laws. 77% of the proposed ban on social media for children, and 75% supported the Australian government's plan to introduce a digital duty of care. And in August 2024, a weighted survey of Australians found that 79% said that social media platforms should operate with a regulator with power to order content removal. So that seems like a pretty overwhelming number of support from the public.
That wasn't my question, Mr. McGrant. My question was why have we not provided a list of what the Commissioner considers worthy of a takedown notice and reasons why? A breakdown of the reasons.
Well, we provide as much transparency as we can. You would understand that confidentiality is incredibly important in terms of we can't describe these in great detail, we can't name names. What kind of information do you think would be helpful to your understanding? And that's something that we can certainly look at in the interests of transparency.
The specific behaviours, without breaching confidentiality, we wouldn't expect you to breach confidentiality or name names, certainly not. But the types of actions that the Commissioner thinks worthy of a takedown notice, as I said, and the reasons why.
I think the Commissioner and indeed myself are trying to understand with a little more precision what sort of information you think. So you're simply saying a generalised list of examples that are de-identified?
Of 40,000 complaints we receive annually.
Well, you're dealing with them, so presumably you know what they are. So I'd like to see them some sort of classification so that people could understand the proportions. Because at the moment, I don't think you're accountable for that.
We can take that on
What was
notice.
that, Chair?
I just said last question.
Senator,
Okay,
we can take that on notice. Of course, something like we would have to look at privacy and confidentiality. We'd also have to look at resource implications and how that might serve the public interest, but we're happy to take a look at that and take that on notice.
I think the people have a right to know. Okay, last question. Referencing unofficial takedown notices, which I note are issued under Section 183(2) ZK, these go to the question of your secrecy. If these are dangerous enough to require a takedown, then they should be dangerous enough for you to list out by making the register of takedown notices public knowledge. That's what I was getting at. Otherwise, you're simply exercising power without any accountability, power that can be abused. How would we know? Can you point, Commissioner, to one terrorist act you prevented, one person de-radicalised, one benefit to Australian society from the money you have spent on your campaign against extremist material?
I often go back to what, again, DG Burgess often says, you know, you're never congratulated when you stop something from happening. And again, do we have to have more heartbreaking examples of, like I just explained to you, happened with those 3 little girls murdered in Southport, UK? We'll never know. What I do know is I have parents coming up to me and saying, you've saved my son's life. He was sexually extorted. He had just turned 18. He went to the police. No one would help him. I wasn't going to let it go. I found your website. Your investigators supported him, got the content down, gave him advice, sent him on to mental health support services. So I do know that we're saving lives every day. I mean, how many cases of 12 and 13-year-old girls being cyberbullied and bullied do you need to prove that this is a veritable epidemic, and young people are losing their lives. We're here to help them and to prevent that from happening. You know, my biggest regret, if there is one, is that more people don't know about us. Only about 40% of the Australian population knows about us, but we do everything we can to help people. When we stop helping people, making the online world a safer and better place, then yeah, it's time to hang up our hats, but we're just getting started.
With due respect, Mr.
Senator Roberts, we have to rotate the call. There's a lot of senators who wish to ask questions. I can come back to you if you wish.
Well, it'll only take a second to do this.
Go on then.
Thank you. I asked about, can you point to one terrorist act? Look, I accept you're doing a good job with preventing child abuse. No doubt about that. We've discussed that in the past. Can you point to one terrorist act you prevented, one person de-radicalised, one benefit to Australian society from the money you have spent on your campaign against extremist material? That's what I want to know.
We're not going out into the public asking young people if they saw a particular video that radicalized them or not. We do know when people have been radicalized by content that has been online. I would like to think that we've probably, some of the gore content that we've taken down, the manifestos, the horrific imagery of people at Christchurch huddling in the corner while being shot, anything that's dehumanizing, that we are able to get down and not cause further pain to victims and their families and not incite others into taking the same action, I think is worth doing. But I don't need proof that I've prevented this, that, or the other from happening. We're trying to make the internet a safer, more positive place with less violent extremist material, and that's why we take these issues so seriously.
We'll go to Senator Dunn, but I'm sorry, Senator Roberts, we're moving on. I'm sorry, Senator Roberts, but we are moving on. You can put your questions on notice from here. We'll go to Senator Dunn.
Thank you. Commissioner, we've seen recent reports of an invitation that you received from Dr. Andrew Forrest to attend the Artificial Intelligence Summit at Minderoo Station last August. Just wondered if you could talk to the committee about why you would attend an event like this and how it fits within your broader engagement strategy.
Sure, Senator. Well, the invitation came from the Minderoo Foundation. As you may know, they've been involved in frontier tech for a long time, so they've developed a very strong network of global academics and AI leaders around the globe. And so they actually brought together at Minderoo Station 32 of the greatest minds in AI for a weekend discussion around AI safety, responsible AI, and ethics. And of course, I always assess, I always do is there ROI here? And I have to say, I don't think there's ever been a gathering of this many AI experts ever in Australia. So I had a 4-city trip, one that took me to Perth. The only way that I could get up to Minderoo Station, short of driving 14 and a half hours each way, was through the chartered plane. So I did accept that as a gift. I rode with the other people up there, and I stayed on the premises. The estimated gift, if you were was about $5,100. I've learned a tremendous amount, and really my philosophy is I could sit in my office and just do correspondence, or I could get out there and I could learn about the technology changes that are happening, and I can meet the technologists who are creating it. I can talk to the people who are experts who know how this could go wrong and what we need to do to draw these red lines. So I've harnessed a lot of those relationships and that knowledge in terms of the regulation of AI we're doing today. So that was the relevance. It wasn't a great expense to the taxpayer at all. And it is on the January gifts and registers list. And having ACMA and eSafety having gone through an AO audit, we've learned a lot. We've really strengthened our policies, and I think you'll see a lot of rigor, not only in terms of which things I accept and how much they cost, and that goes for my staff too, but I'm also listing all of the things I'm invited to that I say no to, which are obviously a longer list.
Did you want to make any further comments about your broader engagement strategy? And I know earlier in response to Senator Roberts, I think you talked about, I think only 40% of Australians know.
Right. I mean, we're just coming up on 10 years. We're a small agency. We have 189 ASL. So we use earned media to try and get word out, and some marketing, and I think we really punch above our weight. This year we've had 4.7 million unique visitors to our website. We've had 11 million website views. We've reached 1 million Australian school students through our virtual classrooms. We have trusted eSafety providers, which last year alone reached 1.2 million users. So we're using all the tools at our disposal. It's just that sometimes I come across people, particularly people who've had tragic occurrences with a child, and even sometimes police. I had no idea that you had these powers, or you had the ability to achieve takedown or to work directly with these overseas entities. And so, really that's why we want to get more of the word out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Cadell.
Thank you. Going to the recent ART tribunal, I think with Baumgartner was the plaintiff. That was recent enough. Are you considering appeal, still considering your position? Can that be appealed, or what's the position of the eSafety Commissioner on that ruling?
That is, as you know, before the tribunal. I will turn over to our General Counsel, Mr. Fleming, to talk about what that decision actually said and what our options are.
Yeah, Senator, thanks for the question. So, as you say, we need to be careful about what we say, given it's still before the tribunal. The ART noted the range of powers that the eSafety Commissioner has in its performing her role and functions. The main issue for the ART was whether they had jurisdiction to review the process decision that was made by eSafety. That was an interlocutory decision. They found they did have jurisdiction. We are still considering that decision, and we'll make a decision before the end of the appeal period.
The balance between free speech and protection is a hard one for legislators and enforcers. I get that balance of that, and we're all on the spectrum one way or another, but on this one it's an interesting one. My understanding, and please, I'm learning here as I go, is that the difference between an informal versus a formal takedown notice is what was the interlocutor decision. It was that you said it was informal notice, there wasn't. And the ART initially said that because it was the way it was lodged, not because of the form it was a reason that they could appeal. Is that my understanding?
Again, Senator, without kind of going too much into it, there was the judgment sets out a range of factors that they used as indicia as to why they found they had jurisdiction.
Yep.
Without sort of wanting to paraphrase those, just direct you to that judgment. It does set those out.
Okay. Have you changed procedures or any other methods of doing business or giving informal notice in the basis of that decision to this point?
So, Senator, these are very individual and specific judgments based on the specific circumstances and facts.
Narrow, yep.
We have considered whether what we're doing is what we should be doing, and we've made some small changes, and we hope that will further clarify the difference between those two approaches.
Right. Understood. Sort of. So a small change in procedure, looking how this goes forward while we assessed options of what you will do on this specific decision.
And that's right, Senator. And the other thing to bear out is that in the Online Safety Act review, there's a recommendation in there that recommends that this approach be maintained and strengthened. So I think that's recommendation 14 of the Online Safety Act review. So that independent review did see a lot of value in the timeliness that we can get things taken down because of that informal process. So there's a few things to play out.
Are there any other notices or appeals or actions like this that you're aware of on foot?
We have a number of matters before the tribunal, but this is really the only one that relates to this issue.
Okay. If I can go, something you touched on with earlier questions, I think from Senator Hanson-Young, around the age verification trials and what we get there. I am notoriously torn apart by people for being the percentage that looked up pornography in this hearing 2.5 years ago. Will that extend beyond social media? I think you expressed some desire to go to gambling and or pornography. Is that a possibility that the technical and solutions could go that far, or is it only on social media?
This particular bill?
No, not the bill, the assurance trials that you're...
Oh, the age assurance trial is one that's being run by the department.
Yeah. Are you having input into that? Would you like to see it look at these other things?
I think the trial as it is very well scoped. It's worth noting that we have a set of what we call our Phase 2 codes, which will cover 8 sectors of the industry, from device manufacturers to app stores to social media sites. And these will be provided to us, the draft codes will be provided to us by industry at the end of this week, and that will require them to take steps to prevent children from accessing Class 2 content like pornography, self-harm, disordered eating content, and our stated desire through a position paper we put to the industry is that we would like to see responsibility taken up and down the technology stack. So once we get those and we analyze those against the guidance that we've given them, I need to determine whether they meet appropriate community safeguards. And I think the reason I'm mentioning this goes back to a statement that she had said that the social media minimum age bill will help us achieve certain things, but not everything. We need multiple interventions, and that includes the prevention, that includes safety by design, that includes the systemic powers, the transparency, the codes, the standards. All of these things together, I think, will make us strong. Now, this is definitely a very bold step that we're taking, and that the world is watching. Last week, I put out some online safety advisories, a new kind of product around AI companions and sexualized chatbots, and our concern that young people, even in upper primary school, are spending up to 4 to 5 hours a day engaging with AI companions that can be based on celebrities or characters. You may be aware there was a big New York Times piece about a US-based case where a mother is suing character AI. That is something that's impacting children here too. Right now, we don't have any tools to be able to deal with that phenomenon. And that's why I think it is really smart that we've got a 2-year review period for the social media minimum age bill. The government this year brought up the Online Safety Act review to 2 years. Technology is changing rapidly, and the tools that we have need to evolve with it.
And knowing it was both a government and bipartisan thing, the age assurance, one of the personal reservations I had, sorry, Leader, was that it was to look at these age assurance trials and other things and develop the rules as they work. We don't know how it's going to work or what. There was general agreement across everywhere of the intent, but how it's going to work still. And so are you working closely, seeing you'll have carriage of the under 16 social media ban with this? You have good visibility of...
I have good, we're observers on the stakeholder group. As I said, we have a separate MOU. This is being run by the department. I think they made a very good choice with respect to the consortium that they're going with. I think that in April we'll have an interim report. In June we'll have a final report. And the scoping that the department did shows that it will be looking even beyond the age assurance trial to things like parental controls. That will be valuable for all of us in terms of looking at very different ways we can keep kids safer online.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Billick, Senator Dunman, do you have anything further?
Yep. Just looking back over this term of Parliament, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about how the Commission has changed over the last couple of years. So your office received substantial new resourcing and stability of funding since 2022, and you've talked quite a bit today about, you know, some of the achievements that the office has made and the inroads into making things safer. Can you talk a bit more about how you've been able to deliver more specifically with the increased resourcing that you've been able to secure?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying, you know, we've really welcomed the foundation of certainty that consistent funding has brought to us, and the resourcing for us to be able to move from 35 ASL when I started to 189. What I'd love to do is turn over to our Head of Technology and Strategy, Ms. King, to talk about the range of things that we've been able to do, again, to help us get a little bit ahead with our technology advisory and our technology tools that are actually home-built as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. And evening, Senator. Catherine King, General Manager. As the Commissioner said, we have received additional funding over time, in particular related to our ongoing baseline funding. And so through that, we've been able to build up additional internal capability, of course, around our regulatory functions, our education functions, but also around our technology capability. As the Commissioner said, technology is advancing and moving so rapidly. We need to have that internal expertise as well. So we have internal technology teams that have been part of that funding over time. That includes the ability to provide those advisories that the Commissioner also just mentioned around new and emerging applications and technologies. And we'll be really supporting things like our technology facilitated abuse service and other advice we give to the public as well. So we've really put quite a focus on having that internal expertise in-house to be able to keep up best we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Commissioner, thank you so much for your time. I was incorrect. We didn't make it all the way to 5:15.
I'm not going to complain.
Thank you so much